All right, y'all. This is Psych 101, Conditioning and Learning. We are trying to redo the lecture from last week, so this is what it is. Yes. So conditioning and learning, how we learn. And I know everybody thinks of learning as in, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, but we're not going to talk about that type of learning. We're talking about learning in terms of your behaviors and how you interact with society around you. Basically, if there's any behaviors you want to change, we'll talk a little bit about that. If there's any, if you have phobias, I know phobias is a big one that a lot of people experience, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's first start with classical conditioning, which was founded by Ivan Pavlov like in 1930 or so. And how did he do it? He did it by studying the salivation in dogs. And you're like, what does that mean? So the salivation, what he did is he would insert tubes into the dog's neck, and when he would feed them, he would notice that they were salivating. And he then began to ask the question, how or why are these dogs salivating to food, or not even to food anymore, but just to ringing the bell? Basically, they learned that the bell meant food, and that's how classical conditioning came about. So let me give you some of the terms regarding classical conditioning, and I'll give you like the actual fancy definition of classical conditioning. So welcome again, Psych 101, Professor White here. I really appreciate everybody for pulling up. I decided to do the lecture a little bit earlier. It would have been at 6, but unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with TikTok Live Studio. So maybe I won't do that next week, and we'll just figure out something else. But anyway, so classical conditioning. So some of the terms that you have to learn is your unconditional stimulus. So that's a stimulus that elicits a response in the absence of learning. So what does that mean? What is an example of a stimulus in the absence of learning? So that can include food. That's a great stimulus. Let's rephrase that. Good food is a great example of a stimulus. So a good food could be, I like pizza. Pizza's a classic. Who doesn't love pizza? So you walk into a nice pizza place, a good mom and pop. You can smell the basil, the oregano. You can smell the sauce. You can smell the cheese, the meltingness of it all. And that would be your example of unconditioned stimulus in the classical term of classical conditioning. So if you have unconditioned stimulus, which is food, you also have an unconditioned response. So that is a response elicited by a stimulus in the absence of learning. So what is an example of that? That'll be your salivating or your tummy rumbling because now you smell food. Any of those natural reactions, you didn't have to learn them. It is a biological reaction. Obviously, you can have a more negative stimulus like pain, and then your unconditioned response would be, unconditioned stimulus could be a pin. So you get stuck by a pin because, you're digging around in a drawer. That pain is your unconditioned stimulus. It's a natural response. You did not have to learn it. It's like a biological response. And then you have what is called a neutral stimulus, which is very interesting. I know this is like a lot of terms and extra, but like bear with me. I'm going to get you guys there. I just got to give you the terms. So bear with me here. So a neutral stimulus is a stimulus that does not by itself elicit a response. It means nothing. So a neutral stimulus could be a bell. A bell by itself means nothing. You have to be taught what a bell means. All right? You still with me? I hope you're still with me. So a neutral stimulus can become a conditioned stimulus. Okay? So you have to pair the unconditioned stimulus, which will be your food, right? A pizza. We said pizza because I love pizza. With a neutral stimulus, which will be a bell. And if you keep pairing those two, eventually you'll respond to just the bell. So let me further explain that. Right? Because does that make sense? I keep giving you food, and every time I give you food, I ring a bell. Eventually, I can just ring the bell, and you'll just respond to that. You don't even need the food to be present. You'll naturally salivate to just the sound of the bell, because you know that means I'm getting food. So, a neutral stimulus, the bell, becomes a conditioned stimulus. You are not late because I'm early. I realized that late at night, people, at 8, a lot of people couldn't make it because it was getting a little too late. And I was getting tired. So I was like, let me just do it earlier so that I can get back to grading. So you are not late. You are right on time. Where was I at? Neutral stimulus. Yes, conditioned stimulus, conditioned response. So this is a response to a conditioned stimulus. So let's take it back to the beginning. I know I'm giving you a lot of stimulus, but come on. Unconditioned stimulus, food. Unconditioned response, salivating to that good food. Some oxtails. Neutral stimulus means nothing. A bell means nothing. You pair the bell with that food. So people are like, dinner time, ring a ding a ding a ding ding ding, dinner time. You will naturally respond to that. You will no longer need the food to even be present for you to salivate. Right? So that's your conditioned stimulus. Your conditioned response is, again, still salivating. Same thing, it's still salivating, unconditioned or conditioned response. But it's what causes the response. So, all that to say, classical conditioning or Pavlov conditioning or respondent conditioning, whatever you want to call it, is basically the process by which a previously neutral stimulus has the capacity to elicit a response after being paired with an unconditioned stimulus. That's a lot going on. I know. But I'm going to give you a classic psychology experiment in a moment. But before we jump into that, I want to say this to you. A little bit. That's all right. Just come on. We building. So that's all right. So, so first of all, if you learn to respond to just the bell, I'm ringing the bell, ding, 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 and you're always salivating. But if I don't present food at some point in time, you're going to be like, that bell means nothing. I'm not responding to that. I'm not getting my oxtail and rice and peas. Should I salivate? That bell means nothing. So what that is extinction. That's the eventual disappearance of a learned response. You learn to respond to that bell. I have not given you your oxtails. You're not responding to that bell anymore. Or whatever your favorite food is. I do like oxtails. So that's extinction. Then you have spontaneous recovery. Poof! It's back again. Thank you for the follow, Lena. I appreciate you. So poof is back again. So just out of nowhere, the sudden reappearance of that learned response. After extinction has occurred, you have had to realize that bell means nothing and you are not getting your oxtails. I ring it and all of a sudden you're salivating again. It just comes right back. And then you have high order conditioning. So basically you're just pairing a bunch of stimulus. So if I have the bell, then I do a light and things of that sort. Again, bear with me. I'm giving you an example of the story. I know I talked about the dogs and the salivating. You're like, what does that mean to me? That means nothing. You have stimulus generalization. So that means you're going to respond to any stimulus that's similar to the unconditioned stimulus or your conditioned stimulus. So an example of that is if I've been had a bell this whole time and now I have a gong or a ring. Like it's a sound, it's similar, but it's not the same. You know what I'm saying? So you'll still respond. And then stimulus discrimination means like, I know you're lying to me. That bell, that gong that you try to pass off as the bell is not the same. And so that is your classical conditioning with a whole bunch of terms. And what did that even mean? What did that mean? Professor White, I didn't understand anything you just said. That didn't even make sense. What are you talking about? You're talking about bells and food and things. So, luckily, somebody else decided to step up the game. They decided to give the real world implications of the Pavlovian theory. And that is John B. Watson, who's basically, he could almost be considered the founder of American behaviorism. And what that is he wanted to apply classical conditioning to emotions. And here's where it gets a little unethical on Watson's part. He decided to look at phobias. So if there's people in the chat, what are some of your phobias? Like, what are you afraid of? If you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, put it in the chat. What is a phobia that you have or a loved one may have? Heights. Heights is a big one. Heights actually is a very common phobia of humans. It's heights, spiders, and snakes, because those are 3 things that can take us out of here. Okay? So that is why it's a very common phobias. Then there's the phobia of balloons, the phobia of the color purple, the phobia, like there's so many different types of phobias that one can develop. If we get into, I think that was abnormal psych. Well, we'll see how this goes. If I end up doing abnormal psych for you guys, we can dive deeper into phobias and how phobias are not necessarily genetic, but are passed down. You saw a cotton ball phobia way back in the day on Maury. Listen, I remember those Maury episodes of those phobias. Okay, let's talk about it. Obviously, I have a touch of the phobia with the little holes, like sunflowers, like the little itty bitty holes, or lotus flowers. Ugh. Push Play the DJ, I appreciate you for being here. Y'all make sure you follow my boy Push. Amazing content creator there. But any phobias that you may have. So John B. Watson, he decided to do an experiment. It is famous. It's called the Baby Albert experiment. And so now the Baby Albert experiment is establishing a rat phobia in an 11-month-old baby boy. Hello? That is unethical. APA guidelines means you could not do that today. This was in the 70s, I believe. So, they were playing fast and loose with the experiments that they were doing. It's believed that baby Albert was a child of one of the research assistants for John B. Watson. And yeah. So, we're going to take that classical conditioning. You remember I was talking about foods and bells and things? Here it is. The rat. Baby Albert enjoyed the rat. Obviously, it's an albino white rat. I worked with those during undergrad at Rutgers, representing Rutgers. And literally, baby Albert would play with this little albino rat. So it's all white with pink eyes. He loved this rat. Was not scared of it at all. So what Watson would do is he would sneak up behind baby Albert. And he would take 2 pieces of metal and clang them together behind baby Albert. Obviously startling the baby. Obviously scaring the baby. Obviously at some point in time, baby Albert would associate that rat with that loud clanging noise and that startling, that scariness. And eventually baby Albert became very afraid of the rat. So that's taking classical conditioning, your unconditioned stimulus. The rat meant nothing, but he started clanging those loud noises, and he began to associate the two together. Baby Albert learned fear from that rat. So it's a shame you can't do that today, but that is your phobia. That is how phobias can be developed and how they can be learned. And he was basically manipulating baby Albert's emotions. It's sad, it's horrible, I know. But if you have phobias, like our friend said earlier for heights, I'm sorry, what is your name? Because you just are listed as like a little fox in here. So if you have any phobias, or phobia of a cotton ball, or phobia of anything, Tig, okay. That is cute. Because I just see the little emote and I'm like, I can't say your name. So thank you so much, Tig, for hanging out with me. So if you're afraid of heights, there's a couple things you can do to deal with whatever your phobias may be. First one is counter conditioning. So oh no, thank you so much for even being here. I appreciate the support. Counter conditioning is the process of pairing a conditioned stimulus with a stimulus that elicits a response that goes against or incompatible. So what does that mean? Let's go back. So you're afraid of heights, right? So what I would do is, I would put you in a situation where you're very high up. I'm sorry, that gives you anxiety, but I would pair it with something you enjoy. So whether that, who doesn't love money? I could pay you. Or if you have a favorite food, so we'll just say it's steak. I don't know, I would pair it with that. So something positive, something you enjoy, but you'll be in a height type of situation. If it's in an elevator, one of those glass elevators on the side of a building, which I don't understand why. I don't like elevators myself. I'm gonna say it might be almost a slight phobia, but I know I'm not doing 20 flights of stairs. So we will put you in that elevator on the side of the building, glass, so you see the heights. But we will pair you with puppies, something that you'll enjoy. And because that unwanted response is being paired with a positive response, eventually you might be able to work through it. Now, that might not work for you. That's okay. So we can do something else. Thank you for the likes. I appreciate that. What else we could do is systematic desensitization. That's the thing in psychology. Probably not. I understand, because you can't give me chocolate chip cookies and think I'm gonna be okay. No. So we'll do systematic desensitization. So that's a behavior therapy approach, a step-by-step process of desensitizing you to your fear object or experience. So we're going back to heights, right? So what I would do is a step-by-step. So we'll do something small. We'll show you a picture of a cliff. That is your first step. And once you have worked through your anxiety over that, we'll go to the second step, which would be... Oh, excuse me. I apologize. Oh, excuse me. So if we did the picture, then we would maybe show you a video. Let you work through your anxiety. Then we might bring you to the building that is tall, but you're not in it yet. Work through your anxiety. So step by step. And you don't move on to the next step until you are fully relaxed and you're not anxious and upset and fearing that height. To eventually we can get you to the elevator, work through it, get you on the elevator, not moving yet, and then we'll slowly take you up. So you're working through your heights. And as you relax, we'll go a little bit further. So that's a step-by-step process. And what's so good about systematic desensitization is you could do that yourself. if you have some type of fear, you can use that step-by-step approach on yourself to work through whatever phobia you may have. Okay? And then obviously there's the more extreme approach, was the flooding, which is what you would see on Maury, which you just like throw the person in the room or whatever fear they may have and just throw them into the deep end and say sink or swim, you'll live. As long as you live, you will be fine. I don't recommend flooding because that person can have a really bad anxiety attack, which only reinforces their fear. Yeah. Excuse me. I apologize. So we talked about classical conditioning. So now we're going to look at operant conditioning. So that's a different type of conditioning. So that's making something more likely or less likely to reoccur. So that makes sense. So what does that mean? And this one's actually easier to understand in classical conditioning because you're like, what are you talking about? So it's all about reinforcements and punishments. And this is made famous by B.F. Skinner, who's the founder of radical behaviorism. So we'll talk about consequences. 3 major types of consequences. You have a neutral consequence, which doesn't increase or decrease the behavior or make it more likely to occur or not to occur. So if we're opening a door, it squeaks. As long as you don't have sound issues, you don't care about that door squeaking. It doesn't bother you. You're not going to stop opening the door because the door squeaks. You're going to move on with your life. Whatever. But reinforcement is you're making the process more likely to reoccur. So if every time you open that door, a $5 bill magically appears, you're going to keep opening that door. Right? Because, I mean, who's saying no to magical $5 appearing when you open the door? I would do it. I would be opening the door and be like, Professor, why you keep opening the door? I keep taking $5 out the air. A reinforcement strengthens the response or the behavior, which is opening the door and making it more likely to occur. I'm not leaving, right? Be like, whoop, 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 just opening the door. But then there's the other side. There's punishment. So punishment makes the behavior less likely to reoccur. So what is that? Back to our door. You tried to open the door. You open the door and then you get electric shock. Like zzz. So now it's pain. Pain is like basically the number one punisher for humans. Or basically anything. I would not open that door. If I'm going to get shocked, like a really good zap, not a little, static shock, like a good zap, that your hair stands up, you won't open that door. You're not touching that door. Never again. So that's your neutral consequence, reinforcement, and punishment. So there's 2 types of reinforcers. There's your primary reinforcer, which is a biologically reinforcing, that would be food and water. Because no matter what, you need food and water to survive. It's as simple as that. Your primary punisher, again, will be something bodily, so you're causing pain. Secondary reinforcer would be a stimulus that has reinforcing properties, which is money. So while we think money is like number one, especially in society, we're in a very capitalist society, money is number one, but money means nothing. If society falls tomorrow, would you rather have a $5 bill or a loaf of bread? Money means nothing, so now you need that loaf of bread regardless. So however you need to obtain it, right? So money will be your secondary reinforcer, and your secondary punisher be something that takes away money to prevent you from eating, which could be a parking ticket, right? Paying for a parking ticket or a speeding ticket takes money out of your pocket, and now you're eating ramen for the week and you can't have any chicken. You can't have a real protein. But thank you everybody for coming by, stopping through, circling back. Okay. So let's talk about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Here we go. So positive reinforcement is a presentation of a reward. The goal is to make a behavior more likely to occur. If you hear the term reinforcement, the goal is to always make the behavior more likely to reoccur. Y'all write this down now, okay? So positive reinforcement is your goal is to make the behavior more likely to reoccur. Classic example, growing up, if you did well on your report card, you had A's, you get $10, you B's, you get $5, anything less than that, you get no money. So that's straight up bribery, but bribery works, and it makes that behavior more likely to reoccur. Do we unintentionally condition ourselves or others to certain behaviors? Yes. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Trish, thank you so much for that question. I appreciate you. Yeah, you, especially if you're shaping people to perform a certain way, you will incentivize them. You will find ways. I know I could approach my friend Latricia with a trip to the bookstore, because I know if I get her to the bookstore and maybe buy her some books, we could also go out to eat. I might even be able to get her to go to Philly with me, even though she's very anti-Philly. I'm like, there's an amazing bookstore in Philly. Don't you want to go? I could trick her. Okay, sorry. So positive reinforcement. Next is your negative reinforcement. Food and books definitely are a great incentive. Exactly. Know your audience. So negative reinforcement. So this one is very interesting. Because remember, reinforcement means we want the behavior more likely to reoccur. And there's the episode of The Big Bang Theory in which Sheldon describes negative reinforcement wrong. He describes it as a punishment. And I was about to literally be on Twitter and say, you described that wrong. How are you supposed to be a science show and you don't even have the terminology correct? But I pulled back. I did not do it. Thank you, Living Legends, for the likes. I appreciate you. I did not do it. I stopped myself. But either way, negative reinforcement, like I said, anytime you have the term reinforcement, it makes the behavior more likely to reoccur. So positive reinforcement, we're giving money for straight A's. Negative reinforcement, we're going to remove something that is negative to the person. It's an unwanted stimulus of some sort. And we are going to remove that to make the behavior more likely to reoccur. So what is that? So an example of that would be, remember, we want our kid to get straight A's. We want our kid to do well in school. So we're going to remove something negative. That negative thing will be chores. If they get straight A's, they are off chore duty for a month. Nobody likes chores. Who wants to clean? Nobody wants that. So you're removing something negative. Chores to get something positive that you want them to do, which is get straight A's. You want that behavior to reoccur. That is negative reinforcement. So if anybody ever describes that incorrectly, you can tell them Professor White told me how to describe negative reinforcement. Because a lot of times people use negative reinforcement as punishment and they're using it wrong. That is not the right way to do it. So, sorry. People always make me mad with that. I see it all the time. I have to correct my students. I'm like, no, no, no. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. I thought it was negative. So it's actually positive? Yes. If it has the term reinforcement in it, it is always positive in nature. You want a behavior to reoccur. So negative reinforcement, you're taking away the chores so they can get straight A's. Positive reinforcement, you're giving them money to get straight A's. Still positive in nature. But a lot of times people mix it up. So what? How much time do we have? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna stop it there because I don't want to go on too long, and we're gonna get into the pros and cons of punishment and the 6 reasons why punishment fails, and that is a really deep discussion. And I know people will be fighting me in the comments for that one on why you should not use punishment and what you can do instead. So to not get into that, I don't want this to go on too long. I want to try to start having these lectures only be 30 minutes, and we're in and out, giving you knowledge. So we'll come back to part 2 of conditioning and learning. The syllabus is in my bio, and it'll be constantly updated, so please keep checking on it. I've changed some things. I'm not going to make you I'm not going to make you have to do like the homework. You can write a paper if you want to. I'll read it, I'll grade it, but you don't have to. I'm not going to make you do that. But instead, just pull up, follow me on YouTube. So you can watch the recorded lecture if you miss a lecture for whatever reason, and I'll try to update and try to let you guys know as soon as possible. But yes, Trish, I know you want to hear that lecture on punishment and why punishment fails and why you should not use it. Any type of physical punishment. I know some kids now that need punishment. Thank you so much, Tig. I appreciate that. So, on that note, I'm going to end this here. I appreciate everybody for coming. That is part 1 of conditioning and learning. I will update the syllabus again to reflect part 2 of conditioning and learning, and the dates will constantly fluctuate depending on what we get through. I know some adults that need punishment. Listen, oh child, see, you see, we could go down a rabbit hole, and we're not even in that part of the lecture yet. So we'll do 6 reasons why punishment fails, guidelines for punishment, extrinsic and intrinsic rewards, the Bandura-Bobo doll experiment, observational learning. Yeah, so we have a lot. Hope you post last week's. So this is last week's. We had some technical difficulties. So Slice of Life, this is last week's, and this will be posted. We had some technical difficulties and just had to redo everything. So sadly, yeah. You know, listen, technology takes us all out. I was 30 minutes late today because technology refused to work, and I had to keep redoing, restarting, and everything like that. I was fighting for my life with this. But I appreciate you, and I will have this posted as soon as I end the live, and it, takes a little bit time to render to get it up there on YouTube. But thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of you. I want you all to have a great day and use some of this learning that I just shared with you. And if you have a phobia, let me know if you use systematic desensitization to help yourself with that phobia. Let me know. All right. Bye, everybody. I got to push this end.